Meet Antonela, a woman born into a world of wealth, privilege, and expectations. But what happens when she decides to leave it all behind in search of a life that's truly hers? In a new city, hiding her family name, she finds independence and a love she thought was real, until betrayal shatters her carefully built world. Now, Antonela must confront the deception, reclaim her freedom, and rise from the ashes of her past. Will she find the strength to rewrite her destiny? Witness her journey of power, resilience, and redemption. Since I can remember, my life was like a scene from a movie, one where opulence and admiration seemed to flow endlessly, and every moment held a polished, impeccable sheen. I grew up surrounded by luxuries others could hardly imagine. Grand dinners, exotic trips, and family gatherings where people admired the power that my family name commanded. Yet, beneath all this elegance, a quiet restlessness was growing inside me, a whisper in the back of my mind asking, what would happen if it all vanished tomorrow? Who would I be if my name held no weight? My father especially wanted the best for me. I felt it in his protective gaze, even in his well-intentioned commands. But that same protection often felt like a golden cage, as if my life was mapped out before me. No matter where I went, people knew who I was without my needing to say a word. I'd often feel like a spectator in my own life, trapped by the pride my family held for me, yet unable to express who I really was. Surrounded by everything anyone could want, I still found myself yearning for something real, something that belonged to me alone. When I hit my teenage years, I began to realize that if I ever wanted anything authentic, I'd need to break away. Independence became my private desire, the forbidden thought I guarded fiercely from my family. The world saw me as the perfect daughter, living a life of ease and privilege. But hidden within, I was restless, craving the thrill of facing the world on my own, of making mistakes, of struggling and rising again solely by my own effort. My life might have looked perfect from the outside, but there was no true satisfaction in it, no earned joy. The more I thought about it, the more the desire grew, overpowering even the fear of disappointing my father. I knew that sooner or later, I'd need to leave behind the life everyone else dreamed of and start from scratch. And with this thought circling in my mind, I understood that my journey had only just begun. The decision was made. I left for a city where my last name wouldn't open doors, where people wouldn't glance twice at me or whisper as I passed. I was both nervous and exhilarated, knowing I was finally free from my father's shadow. The first few days were surreal. Every little thing, from finding a modest apartment to buying my own groceries, filled me with a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time, I was living without the weight of expectations or the safety net of my family's influence. Ironically, my father had a company based here, but I was determined to avoid anything that tied me back to that world. I didn't want anyone to know my last name or where I came from. I wanted to experience life purely as me. I found a job at a small shop, a simple place where no one looked at me through a lens of wealth or status. The days were filled with little tasks that most would consider routine, but to me, each one was a new thrill, a moment that reaffirmed I was here by choice, carving my path. Money wasn't an issue, but I chose to live off my own wages, eager to test the limits of what I could achieve on my own. At work, I was just another employee, clocking in my hours and chatting about mundane things with my coworkers. The authenticity was refreshing. No one filtered their words or acted differently around me, and for the first time I felt genuinely seen. Slowly, this simple life began to bring me a quiet happiness that I had never felt before. Here I was building my own space, a life at my own pace, and for once, without any script to follow. Every now and then, I'd think of my family and wonder how they would react to this new chapter in my life. Would they be proud or disappointed? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't go back, not when there was still so much of the world left for me to discover on my own terms. As time passed, my life at the shop began to change in ways I hadn't expected. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and one day, the shop owner offered me a promotion as the general manager. For anyone, it would have been a great opportunity, but for me, it was something even deeper. It was the first time I'd achieved something purely on my own merit, with no influence from my last name. I accepted eagerly, thrilled to finally feel the weight and reward of my own hard work. With the promotion came challenges I'd never anticipated. Each decision I made carried real consequences, not only for me but for my team and the store's success. The long hours and increased responsibilities tested my limits, but the pride I felt at the end of each day made every moment worth it. This was the satisfaction I'd been searching for, the steady, fulfilling joy that came from building something on my own. For the first time, I understood what it meant to feel true pride, and it stirred something fierce and steady inside me. My co-workers began to look at me differently, not because of my family name but because of my role and my dedication. They saw me as a leader who had risen through the ranks, someone who belonged. There was something deeply gratifying in their respect, and I found friendships blossoming that I never would have expected. I was no longer defined by where I came from. I was part of a team, a small, unconventional family of my own choosing. The shop became my second home, a place where every day was another step toward the independence I had longed for. Yet, as much as I savored each new challenge, I couldn't ignore the thought that this simple world was fragile, and in a heartbeat, everything could change. One evening, after a particularly long day at the shop, I impulsively created a profile on a dating app, not really expecting anything to come of it. That's how I met Luciano. From his first message, he seemed refreshingly sincere, free from the airs and pretensions I'd grown so used to. Our conversations flowed naturally, almost effortlessly, and with each exchange, I found myself forgetting the heavy weight of my last name and the secret it carried. Luciano's perspective on life was light and genuine, a breath of fresh air that I hadn't realized I was so desperately craving. Meeting in person only strengthened that spark. He had this way of looking at me that made me feel grounded, as if he saw past the outer layers I kept guarded and looked straight into who I really was. I chose to hide my family's background from him, to keep my past sealed away. I wanted Luciano to know me as Antonela, a woman making her way in the world on her own terms. Each shared meal, each walk through the city, felt like a small rebellion against my past. Being with him became my escape, a rare moment of authenticity in a life I had spent running from expectations. As our relationship deepened, though, keeping my secret grew harder. Luciano had a gentle, steady kindness that made me want to tell him everything, to let him see the full picture. But even as I longed to open up, I couldn't shake the worry that my past would cast a shadow over us. For now, I let things flow naturally, savoring the purity of every shared moment. Luciano didn't seem interested in wealth or names. He cared about the quiet moments, the little stories we shared, and I clung to that sincerity like a lifeline. Yet, despite our closeness, a subtle tension lingered in the back of my mind, as though a part of me knew this peace was fleeting. I found myself questioning how long I could keep up this facade and what would happen if the truth ever slipped into the light. Everything seemed perfect until one night, when Luciano casually mentioned that he worked for one of my father's companies. The shock of it sent a cold rush through me. Out of all the places he could have ended up, it had to be there. I tried to keep my expression neutral, hoping he wouldn't sense the storm of thoughts building inside me. I assured myself it was just a strange coincidence, that there was no way he knew who I really was. Still, the ease and comfort I'd felt with him before now had a small, sharp crack. Not long after, Luciano invited me to a company party. The idea alone made my stomach turn. I knew the risks of being recognized there were high, but refusing would raise his suspicions, so I agreed, all while promising myself I'd keep to the background, shielded from prying eyes. The night was tense from the moment we walked in. I moved carefully through the crowd, aware of every glance, every small gesture around me. And then, almost inevitably, I crossed paths with the company president. His eyes were cold, calculating, his gaze piercing as if he sensed that something about me was amiss. His greeting was laced with a politeness so thin it nearly cut. The disdain beneath his words was palpable, making me feel like an outsider, an imposter who had dared to walk into his world. My heart raced as I forced a polite smile, hoping Luciano wouldn't notice the rigid tension in my posture. The president's look lingered just long enough to leave a bitter chill, as if he suspected something he couldn't quite confirm. Luciano noticed my discomfort, though he didn't press for details, thankfully. I kept my silence, waiting for the night to end so we could slip out. But the encounter left a bitter edge in my mind, a whisper that warned me this was only the beginning. As much as I wanted to trust Luciano, the pull of my past and my family's power was always lurking just beneath the surface, ready to test the life I was trying so hard to build. What I feared most happened sooner than I expected. A few days after the party, I decided to surprise Luciano by picking him up from work. I arrived unannounced, slipping through the parking lot, eager to share an unplanned moment with him. But the surprise that awaited me was mine alone. There, tucked in a shadowed corner, I saw Luciano, arms around the company president's daughter, locked in an embrace far too intimate to mistake. In an instant, the ground seemed to vanish beneath me, as though everything I'd thought was solid had crumbled into dust. Luciano saw me almost immediately, his expression shifting from shock to a look I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt or just annoyance at being caught? My body flooded with a cold, seething anger that numbed any urge to cry. I approached, steady, each step weighted with fury. The president's daughter looked confused, stammering an apology that fell silent under the intensity of my gaze. Luciano, scrambling for words, stumbled over meaningless excuses that barely registered. Before he could finish, the company president himself appeared, watching us with an all-too-satisfied smirk, as if he had orchestrated this very moment. In a voice dripping with disdain, he revealed Luciano's true intentions: a future marriage with his daughter and a plan to secure a perfect future by any means necessary. Every word felt like poison, confirming that I had been nothing more than a tool in their scheme. I wanted to scream, but instead, I felt a surge of steely determination rise within me. Despite the betrayal and the humiliating truth laid bare, I stood tall, meeting the president's gaze without flinching. I refused to let them see me broken, even as they walked away, leaving Luciano reaching helplessly after me. Whatever trust, whatever affection I'd felt, was shattered, replaced by a resolve I hadn't known I had. I would fight back, but on my own terms. For the first time, I saw clearly that I would be no one's pawn. Not now, not ever. Days after the confrontation, I was beginning to think that nothing else could shock me. I was exhausted from replaying every moment with Luciano, searching for signs I might have missed. Then, while going through some documents he had left at my place, I found something that stopped me cold. There, tucked within a stack of papers, was a contract bearing my signature. My stomach twisted as I read through it, the reality setting in like ice in my veins. It was a marriage contract, one I had somehow unknowingly been tricked into signing. The weight of the betrayal settled over me, each memory of Luciano's words now tinted with bitter irony. Every look, every touch, every confession of love had been part of a calculated plan to secure a life of status and wealth through me. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the ruthless manipulation or the vulnerability I'd felt, trusting him enough to let my guard down. I'd fallen for the facade he wore so well, blinded by my own desire to feel something real. But the pain of betrayal quickly simmered into something stronger, a fierce resolve. I wasn't the naive girl he'd taken me for, and he'd regret underestimating me. The rage bubbling inside me replaced any trace of heartbreak, fueling my determination to right this wrong. That signature might have been his victory, but I would make it the reason I fought back with every ounce of strength I had. For too long I had been passive, letting others write my story. Not anymore. This time I would be the one to take control no matter what it cost. In the quiet calm that followed this decision, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt truly in command of my life. After uncovering the truth, I moved swiftly. I contacted a lawyer, one skilled in cases like mine, and shared every detail, every shred of deception Luciano had woven around me. Admitting my mistake, my vulnerability, was painful, but my lawyer's unwavering confidence reassured me that I was on the right path. When he reviewed the contract, he looked at me with a mix of astonishment and resolve. We had a case, and while I knew the road would be long and grueling, I was certain that I'd finally taken control. This was about more than pride, it was about reclaiming my freedom, my dignity. The days that followed were relentless, a blur of documents, statements, and meetings. Every step was draining, yet empowering. I felt myself becoming stronger with each confrontation, each piece of evidence we gathered against him. Luciano tried to reach out multiple times, attempting to sway me with apologies and excuses, but I blocked every call, shut down every message. There would be no turning back. His words held no power over me anymore. My goal was clear: to end this nightmare and sever every tie that bound me to him. The process was challenging. Luciano tried every trick he could to delay or complicate the case, pushing my patience to its limits. But the truth was on my side, and with each small victory, I felt a growing sense of triumph. This wasn't just a fight for justice. It was my own rebirth. On days when I felt close to breaking, I reminded myself why I had started, and it fueled me to keep going. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judgment came. I was free. The relief was overwhelming, a quiet but powerful affirmation of all I had endured. I had lost things along the way, but I had gained something far greater, a resilience and self-worth that no one could ever take from me. This was my victory, my liberation, and I knew it marked the beginning of a life I would shape on my own terms. When news of my victory reached my father, I prepared myself for disappointment or disapproval. He had always been exacting, and I'd feared he might see my choices as reckless. Instead, I was met with something I'd never expected: unwavering support. My father didn't scold or question me. He simply listened, offering me his quiet strength. It felt like a relief, a bridge mending the distance I'd kept between us. Then, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, he extended an invitation that stunned me. He wanted me to take a leading role in our family's business. The offer was more than a position. It was his acknowledgement of my growth, an unspoken respect for what I'd endured. Accepting it was daunting. I knew that stepping into such a role meant facing challenges that went far beyond my personal journey. But I also knew this was an opportunity to build something of my own, to lead with the integrity and strength I had fought so hard to find. As president, I found myself at the center of a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and challenges. The weight of the responsibility was intense, yet deeply satisfying. Here I wasn't just fulfilling a legacy. I was shaping it in my own image. I was determined to foster a culture of respect and transparency, setting a new standard for the values I now held so close. My past had taught me hard lessons, and I would use every one of them to transform this company into something I could be proud of. At first, my colleagues regarded me with a mix of caution and skepticism, a natural reaction to the boss's daughter. But over time, through fair decisions and a steady presence, I gained their trust. This was my place now, not because of my family name but because of my own vision, my own effort. Day by day, I felt more assured, ready to face whatever the future held. This was more than a role. It was a testament to my resilience, and each decision I made only strengthened my resolve to keep moving forward. Time passed, and eventually, I heard that Luciano's grand plan had fallen apart. His promised marriage to the company president's daughter never came to fruition. The irony of it all felt like a poetic justice, but rather than satisfaction, I felt only a distant echo of what once was. He had gambled everything, only to lose it in the end. And while he was left to deal with the consequences of his own actions, I was finally free, moving forward, building a life that truly belonged to me. Looking back, I could see how profoundly this experience had shaped me. Every betrayal, every challenge had torn down pieces of the person I once was, only to rebuild me stronger, sharper, and more certain of myself. I had come to value independence in a way I hadn't understood before, learning to trust myself above all. Luciano's deception had once left me shattered, but that very pain had pushed me to find something real, a confidence and authenticity that no one could take from me. My father's support was a vital part of this journey, grounding me in moments when I had doubted myself. Through the years, he had guided the family business with his values, and now it was my turn to do the same, bringing to it the hard-won wisdom I'd gained. In accepting my own strength, I understood that while my family name held a legacy, it no longer defined who I was. My story, my accomplishments, they were mine, earned with courage and persistence. And so I found peace. The scars remained, but they were a part of me now, marking the journey of a woman who had once yearned for freedom and found it against all odds. The Antonela who had set out on this journey, burdened by secrets and insecurities, had transformed. Now, each day brought a sense of purpose, an inner light that reminded me that my path was truly my own.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.